Welcome back. We are here modeling some Kumiko panels. We just did in our last class a Kumiko panel based on the hemp leaf pattern, and we are going to do another Kumiko panel this morning for you. But this time we are going to do what is more typical in Kumiko grid work and model in millimeters. Even American and British woodworkers tend to model Kumiko in millimeters, and the reason for that is that pretty much all the pattern books that you will find are written in Japan, where the standard measurement system is in metric. So we will start modeling on the top of our grid here, and we will model using a center point rectangle. I'm going to make that equal in both measurements. And we are going to start by creating a nice square grid. So I will draw from the center 2 rectangles. I will also draw from the top and from the side. I want to make sure that all of these pieces are equal, 1, by hitting this equals button. If you can't pick it, you can always just hold the button down, and it will allow you to pick anything that you can't automatically pick with your mouse. So I can get all 3 of those to be equal. I will make that top one equal to the middle one equal to the bottom one, which again I will click, hold, and select. And then I will make the top ones equal to the side ones. Click, drag, and select the small one, and I'll pick the other small one. Now, they don't all match up, so I am going to pick this collinear tool and say that the outside edges are all going to match. Did I not pick that right? I'm going to say that this outside edge here matches this outside edge here. That doesn't seem to be working. I wonder why. All right. I will make that outside edge equal to that outside edge, and now they seem to be working fine. I will go down to the bottom and make sure that our edges are all lining up. And I think we are all good. They should overlap each other quite well. Now, the standard for Kumiko, well, there isn't really one, but when I make my strips, I always do them at 2 millimeters wide, so that's what we will do. And I usually make my grid work, so between the inside edge of one and the inside edge of the other, I'll just scroll in. I usually make these panels about 50 millimeters in size. Now, I think we have actually had these jump out on us here. So I'm going to say I want this outside line to be the same as this outside line. These constraints are wonderful. I will just pick this line and say it is supposed to be here. And I think there was one more that went a bit crazy on us. We will go out here and we will grab that. It's always a good idea to model about the size you think you're going to be. I wasn't doing that very well earlier. But you can always push stuff back. So now these are going to be 50 by 50 millimeter grids. Now, last time we modeled the hemp leaf pattern, which is one of the simpler patterns that you can do here. This time we're going to do a little more modern pattern. So first I want to say finish sketch, and I am going to select that whole grid minus the 4 sides, and I'm going to make this 12 millimeters thick, and I will say a new component. And that will give us our grid. We're only going to model one of those segments and then copy it. So I will model a new sketch on that outside line, and I'm going to draw 2 diagonals. The 2 diagonals that I draw are actually just going to be guides. Those are not actually going to be part of our grid. So I will hit X and turn them into guides. Now, I will start by modeling a rectangle, but of course, because it is guide-lined, it will be actually a square. And I'm going to hit D for dimension, and I will give these a dimension of 2 millimeters. So now if I drag this outside piece, I notice two things. One is it is not in the center, but the second is that it expands in all directions without changing the distance between these lines. So I need to give it a dimension to the outside. So I will say D for dimension. And I'm going to say that is going to be 10 millimeters inset. And now it is actually a square confined to the center. So now what I want to do is have an overlapping square. So I am going to pick a center point rectangle, and I am going to start from this outside edge here, and I am going to go slightly in. And I'm going to do the same thing from the middle. I will create a dimension of that edge, and it is going to be 2 millimeters, just like the other. If I double-click on this 2, and I click on the other 2, I can now lock them together. So if I ever wanted to change the state to 1.5, I would change the first one to 1.5, and they would both change. And I can go back and forth. And that seems to work quite well. All these dimensions can change very easily. So if I want this inside square to be 8 millimeters, I can easily do that. Or if I want it to be 12 from the side, I can do that too. So what I'm going to do is I'll give a dimension from the outside to that inner piece, and I will say that is going to be 6. It's a little weird, so we will make it 4. And that links up quite well with our pattern. All right, well, that's not too bad. What I want to do is I want to have that repeat closer into the center. So I'm going to double-click on both of these squares, and I will mirror it across the center line here. And that will give me 3 diagonal diamonds. Now, there are a few other things that I want to do in here. I want to link these pieces together. So I'm going to draw a guideline, I hit X, from the outside edge, and then I will turn off the guides. And what I'm going to do is draw a center point rectangle and link them in. I will hit D for dimension, and I will make that dimension again equal to our original 2 millimeters. Now that piece I want to copy across the center line that is dividing us here. And I want to take those same 2 pieces that I just created, one side and 2 sides, and I want to mirror them across the center as well. So now we have a complete pattern. There's only one other thing that I want to do with this, and that is that I want to draw some diagonal lines. Now, I am going to take a diagonal line and draw it from corner to corner here. I will make that a guide line, and I'm going to draw 2 lines up here. They will be parallel, but they don't have to be when I draw them, because what I will do is I will use the parallel constraint to make them parallel to that line that I just drew, and I am going to make them symmetrical. I think I made this connect in with the midpoint here, which it shouldn't be, so I'll just delete that midpoint constraint, and I will make that coincident with this line. So now, all I need to do is tell it that what I want is for D for dimension, this also to be 2 millimeters. And those diagonal lines will now do that. So I am going to take that diagonal line, 1, 2, and I will mirror it across the center line. I'm going to take those diagonal lines, whoops, I don't need the center, just the 2 diagonal lines, and I will mirror them across the center in the other direction. And now I have what I call the hummingbird pattern. That pattern is not particularly traditional. It's a modern pattern that is my own design, but it is modeled on a traditional pattern that looks like a hummingbird. It's actually got rounded corners on it, which a lot of students find very intimidating the first time they go to cut them. So I designed this square hummingbird pattern to make it a little easier on the students. So if I hit Finish Sketch, the question you have to then ask yourself is, do you want to model it so you can see the pattern emerge, or do you want to model it so you can figure out how to build it? And we are just going to model it so we can see the pattern demonstrated. So I'm going to pick the entire piece. I am apparently not going to be able to pick the entire piece. I am going to have to pick the component parts of this piece because the selection tool is not working. I was going to pick these outside sections first because I want to show you how to do them in multiple different patterns of wood. We're going to pick the squares. Right. We will pick the squares, and we will say a new component. And unlike the last one where we had inset Kumiko, what I'm going to do is I am going to make all of these exactly the same depth as the grid itself. So I have those all the way down. Open my sketch. Which pieces do we not have? We don't have these outside inner filling pieces. I want this square in here. And I will say, again, to Object, go down to the bottom and pick the bottom of the frame. And we will make that a new component as well. Now we have most of our pattern, and we are going to pick these outside edges. Now remember, when we do this, these are not going to come up as separate pieces. If you want them to be separate pieces, you actually have to create the extrusion for them individually so they are not touching. But we just want to show this as a pattern. We're not trying to figure out how to build it. We already know how to build it. We just put in the infill, and I will now take away that sketch. That's pretty good. So before we continue, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick some woods for this. Now, if I was going to build this, what I do with all my Kumiko is I make the standard pieces from maple. So I'll make the whole thing 3D maple, and that includes my grid. Now what I will do is I'm going to pick some other woods to use as infill. So I'm going to make those inside pieces from cherry, and I think that looks quite good. I'll just rotate this up so you can see it more clearly. Remember, rotate, you hold down Shift, click and drag with the middle mouse button. I am going to pick another color. Remember, these are realistically just colors in this case. And I will make those angled braces out of walnut. And I am going to use ash for the other inside piece, just for contrast. And I think what I will do is I will make the outside frame very, very dark, just for a contrast. I don't know if that looks quite like what I was going for. I think what I might actually end up doing is changing this to use the maple for those squares and use the maple for our angled pieces as well. That way it looks a little less cluttered. Okay, I think we are good here. Yeah, that'll work for us today. What I want to do now is I want to say mirror. We are going to say mirror our components. We will pick these three components. Actually, before we do that, let's combine them into a single component. Make it a little easier. Name, Kumiko. And I will drag those three components into the Kumiko component. We'll go back to our main piece. We will mirror our Kumiko component. I need to pick components again. Mirror our Kumiko component, and we will mirror it across the center line. We'll right-click and repeat, and mirror both our Kumiko components across the center line again. And it copies everything that we just did, and we now have this beautiful little bird pattern repeated. It looks very geometric. It doesn't even look all that Japanese, but I think you will find it has a beautiful symmetry to it around the center line. And what we can do with this is, if this shows up and isn't exactly what we are looking for here in terms of our aesthetic, we can go into our panel and we can say, I want this whole thing to be in maple. I can drag it up to the main component and say remove. And now we have a much more traditional look and feel to it. What I would probably do is I would actually make this with a dark grid. Now I can see that we've actually got a small error here where I didn't pick an overlapping segment. So what I'm going to go back and do is I'm going to go and edit this feature. And I'm going to make sure that we pick the piece in the middle that was really small and I didn't see it, where these two components overlap in our design. And now you can see that we have corrected that issue. I'm surprised nobody pointed that out to me here in the chat. Usually finding my mistakes is something you all do far faster than me, but I certainly make them, especially on live streams. So thank you for pointing them out to me, and I'm amazed I got to that one before somebody else noticed it. All right, so that is our Kumiko panel for the day. The only thing that I'm going to do now is show you how to model from that size of Kumiko panel. We're going to make a little piece that goes around the outside as a frame. Last time we turned it into a box. This time we're just going to make a decorative frame for it. So we have our outside edges here. I'm going to say a center point rectangle. From there to the outside, I'm going to make this a Japanese style frame. So I am going to draw a guideline out from the center to the sides. I will click on each of them and hit X to turn them into real guides. And I will draw a dividing line across. Make that collinear with the outside edge. Mirror the line across the center. And I will give a dimension. This outside piece is going to be 41 millimeters. I will say equals. No, I will have to actually dimension them. I didn't draw them as rectangles, so they don't have sides. But I will give a dimension, click on the other one, and hit equals. So now what I want to do is I want to extrude these top rails. And we are going to say our profile plane, but offset by 6 millimeters. We are going to say to object. We will go to the top of our Kumiko frame here and offset that by 3 millimeters. This needs to be -6, and we will call that a new component. Not bad. What I am going to do is I will turn on that sketch and sketch the other two pieces. Apparently in my sketch I forgot one line, so we will edit our sketch and I will make sure that I project the outside edges of the entire piece here, because I could end up with a problem if it doesn't work. All right, so I will turn that sketch back on. I will pick the two missing pieces. I will say that we are going to go from the top. Let's see if it'll work this time. The last time I tried to do this, it gave me an error. Cannot complete extrusion. Yeah, I'm constantly getting this error. Autodesk people, can you please fix it? You should be able to do that. I'm going to go from the center to the to that edge, two sides, pick to go to the top as well. Gives us exactly the same results. And I want this to be a new body. We'll see it creates a bodies folder here, and I'm going to take those bodies and drag them into the component we just made, which I am going to call frame. Now, I think that frame is a bit thick. What we'll actually do is we'll change those numbers. What we're going to do is call that -3 and hit OK. So now our frame is exactly 3 millimeters bigger than our Kumiko in both directions. It's still a bit thick, but that's all right. It's going to probably be on a wall. And it needs to be thick enough to support the actual frame. If I go down here to the bottom, and I create a new extrusion, I should be able to pick the whole thing. Nope. I don't know why that's not working for me today, but I can usually get it to work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's all of it, if I got them all. Yes. So what I want to do is go up 3 millimeters. I will say new component, hit OK, and I'm going to turn off that frame. I'll turn off the sketch, and I am going to say offset face. I'm going to pick my 3 faces, my 4 faces, turn off our Kumiko, Oh, yes, I will turn off our Kumiko. I was missing one. And I'm going to pick all 4 faces of this little box bottom that we have here, and I'm going to make them move out 3 millimeters. I will turn back on all our Kumiko pieces here, and we can see that we have this extrusion here. I'm actually going to make that go 3 millimeters in the other direction. I should have noticed that before. That's why it wasn't working. And now, if I say combine, I can cut each side. I'll just repeat it 4 times with the bottom. And what I'm actually doing here is cutting a little rabbit into each side. So if I turn that bottom off now, I can see that I've got a little inset rabbit where I can glue the bottom in. I know people are going to say, oh, well, gluing it in, it's not very strong. Well, you're going to be hanging this on a wall probably, or using it as a decorative element in something. And that's not really going to be that much of an issue. Now, this is what people often do. They have this 12 millimeter Kumiko strip in the middle. I always think that looks a little awkward. If you can put something behind that, we will open up our panel here, and we will change our back and our frame to be dark, so you can see that that is quite nice, but I think it is awfully deep. So I'm going to go back to our individual panel here in the middle, and instead of it being 12 millimeters deep, I'm going to make it 4 millimeters deep, and I think you will probably agree with me that the whole thing has a much more delicate aesthetic that way. Okay, so that is it for this live class. If there are specific patterns you would like me to look into in terms of the Kumiko, I am happy to do more of those. If you have suggestions of other furniture, or sometimes even furniture components you would like to see me model, there are some other ones upcoming. We're going to do a couple of little toolboxes, some complex ones and some very simple ones. We're also going to look at some things involving curves, but I'm always happy to push things to the top of the list or add new suggestions if you'd like to put them in the comments below. If you have any specific questions, again, you can ask those there, or you can contact me directly using the website or going to my personal email. And I will try to answer them either by responding to your message on email or by doing another live stream class answering the question in person. Okay, if you don't mind, if you could like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, all those things that get us more views on YouTube. Remember, these classes are free to share, and always will remain free. Thank you very much for your time, your eyes, your patience, and following along with me today. I hope you have lots of fun modeling and building in your shop today and on your computer on Fusion 360. See you later.